Monsters become guardians in the most unexpected tales. We are exploring the emotional spectrum of legendary protectors, those figures who began as things to be feared and ended up as beings to be revered. This journey from terror to trust reveals something fundamental about us. By the end, you will understand the hidden psychological forces that allow cultures to transform their deepest fears into their most sacred defenders. How does a dragon shift from a beast to be slain into a symbol of prosperity? What alchemy turns a vengeful spirit into a village guardian? The answers lie in the stories we tell ourselves. What legendary figure from your own culture walked this path from fear to reverence? That primal urge to give fear a face is written deep into our oldest stories. Before a monster can become a guardian, it must first be a monster. Early human societies looked upon a chaotic and dangerous world, and they gave their deepest anxieties a shape they could understand. A failed harvest was not just bad weather, it was the wrath of a spirit. A sudden illness was not a germ, it was the touch of a demon. By personifying these forces, they transformed abstract, overwhelming dread into something tangible, something that could, in theory, be appeased or even fought. Consider the ancient Mesopotamian demon Lamashtu. She was not merely a story, she was the embodiment of a very real, ever-present terror. Mothers feared her because she was said to steal newborns and bring sickness to pregnant women. She gave a name and a form to the heartbreakingly high rates of infant mortality, to the dangers of childbirth that were once a mystery beyond anyone's control. As scholars like Dr. Karen Armstrong have pointed out, this act of externalization is profoundly human. It takes the internal, gnawing anxiety within a community and projects it outward, creating a focal point for all that collective dread. This demon now existed outside of them, and if it existed, then perhaps it could be dealt with. So they developed rituals. They made specific offerings and recited precise incantations, not to worship Lamashtu, but to ward her off. This was the first crucial step in the journey from fear to reverence. It was an attempt to impose order on chaos, to control the uncontrollable by giving it a name and a set of rules for interaction. The very act of creating these fearful beings laid the essential groundwork. You cannot transform a shadow, but you can negotiate with a creature you have named. So what force could possibly turn a named terror into a trusted guardian? The transformation is rarely accidental. It is almost always driven by a powerful cultural catalyst, a shift in the human world that demands a corresponding shift in the stories we tell. Look at the story of Medusa. She begins as a truly horrific monster, a gorgon whose gaze turns men to stone, a symbol of pure, petrifying fear. Yet over time, her likeness was carved onto the shields of warriors and set into the stone of temples. Her snarling face, once the very image of terror, became a protective amulet, an apotropaic device believed to ward off evil itself. This was not a random change of heart. It was a deliberate reinterpretation, fueled by a society finding a new use for an old symbol. Her power was not diminished, it was redirected. Her terrifying gaze was now aimed outward at the enemies of the state, at the malevolent forces threatening the community. The monster had been recruited. This kind of symbolic repurposing is a common thread. Throughout history, periods of massive social upheaval, like the conquest of one culture by another, have acted as powerful engines for this change. When an invading group moves into a new land, they often encounter the local spirits and gods of the people they have subdued. Wiping out these deeply held beliefs can be difficult, even dangerous, fostering resentment and rebellion. A far more pragmatic solution emerges, a form of mythological diplomacy. The conquerors integrate the local deity into their own pantheon, but they soften its edges. A violent, blood-drinking earth spirit might be reimagined as a stern but just guardian of the harvest. This process, which the great anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss observed, shows that myths are not static. They are tools constantly reworked and retold to fit new social realities. A community does not cling to a story that no longer serves it. When the old enemies are gone, or when a new threat appears, the stories adapt. The antagonist of yesterday can become the ally of today, if that is what survival demands. Even prosperity can be a catalyst. When a society becomes more secure, when food is plentiful and walls are strong, the perceived threat of certain figures diminishes. A dragon is less terrifying when you are not starving. This safety creates a space for reimagining, allowing a culture to look upon its old monsters not with dread, but with a sense of nostalgia, even respect. They become relics of a wilder past, symbols of a power that has now, in part, been tamed and harnessed. These catalysts from conquest to comfort reveal a profound truth. Our legends are not carved in stone. They are living things adapting to human necessity, paving the way for a complete emotional reevaluation of the beings we once fled. The dragon perfectly embodies this emotional transformation, a single mythical creature viewed through two entirely different cultural lenses. In the misty, forested landscapes of medieval Europe, the dragon was the ultimate antagonist. Think of Fafnir from the Norse sagas, a creature so consumed by greed for his golden hoard that he transformed into a winged serpent, poisoning the land around him. He was not just a monster. He was a symbol of unchecked avarice and the destructive power of nature, a force of chaos that a hero like Sigurd had to conquer to restore order. This dragon was a thing to be feared, a beast to be slain, its death a necessary victory for civilization. Yet travel east to the river valleys of ancient China, and you find a being of an entirely different character. Here, the dragon Longwang is a benevolent celestial ruler, a master of the rains and the waters. His image adorns temples and palaces, not as a warning, but as an invocation. He was prayed to for timely rains to nourish the crops, his favor directly linked to the prosperity of the entire empire. The dragon was revered, its power seen as essential and life-giving. What could possibly explain such a stark divide in the perception of a single mythical beast? The answer lies not in the creature itself, but in the land and the philosophy of the people who imagined it. In arid Europe, where survival was a constant battle against a harsh wilderness, the dragon's association with fire and destruction resonated deeply. It was the embodiment of the wildfire that could consume a village, the untamable wild that threatened fragile human settlements. But in agricultural China, water was everything. The success of the harvest, and thus the survival of millions, depended on the predictable flow of rivers and the arrival of the monsoon. The dragon, as a ruler of water, became a symbol of that life-sustaining balance, a divine bureaucrat in a cosmic order. Its power was the same raw, natural force, but the human need shaped its identity. Fear or reverence was a matter of context, and even in the West, that context has begun to shift. As our own world has become more secure, our relationship with the dragon has softened. In modern fantasy literature and film, we see dragons reassessed. No longer are they always the mindless beast for a night to slay. They are often ancient, intelligent beings, keepers of forgotten lore and powerful allies. They have become the wise guardians we once could not have imagined, completing a long journey from a symbol of pure terror to one of respected, even awe-inspiring power. The dragon story shows that the line between monster and protector is not fixed in stone, but is drawn and redrawn by the changing needs of the human heart. This psychological shift from terror to trust is not just a cultural phenomenon. It is wired into the human mind itself. Reverence blossoms when a community begins to see the very power that once terrified them as a force that can work in their favor. It is the ultimate cognitive reframing, where a being's immense strength or fearsome nature is reinterpreted not as a random threat, but as a focused instrument of justice or protection. This taps directly into the complex emotion of awe, that potent blend of fear and wonder we feel when confronted with something vast that transcends our understanding. We do not feel awe toward something we can easily control. We feel it toward the storm, the mountain, the ocean, and the deities that command them. The key is the narrative we attach to that power. The Hindu goddess Kali presents a perfect case study. Her iconography is deliberately terrifying, a figure adorned with a necklace of skulls, wielding a sword with a tongue lolling out from bloodlust. She is the embodiment of destruction, of raw, untamed power. Yet for millions of devotees, she is not a monster to be feared, but a mother to be revered. Why? Because her terrifying fury is understood to have a specific, benevolent target, evil itself. She destroys to protect the cosmic order, to cleanse the world of corruption so that creation can begin anew. Her power is the same, but the story around it has been flipped. The fear does not vanish. It is simply mixed with a profound admiration for a power that is now seen as righteous and necessary. This process resonates with the ideas of the psychologist Carl Jung, who spoke of universal archetypes buried deep in the collective unconscious of humanity. One of the most powerful of these is the shadow, which represents the dark, unknown, and often frightening aspects of our own psyche. A figure like Kali can be seen as the shadow made manifest. By confronting and ultimately revering such a figure, a culture is not running from its shadow, but is integrating it. They are acknowledging the destructive forces of the universe and within themselves, and finding a way to channel that energy toward a positive, protective purpose. The monster is not defeated. It is recruited into the psyche's own defense system. The final, crucial ingredient in this psychological recipe is the attribution of intention. Fear is the default response to a powerful, unpredictable entity. But when people begin to believe that this being has protective intentions, that its power is wielded with a sense of justice or wisdom, the emotional calculus changes entirely. Rituals and stories are the tools that cement this new perception. Through prayers and offerings, communities are not just asking for protection, they are actively building a relationship. They are reinforcing the narrative that this god or spirit is on their side. The stories told around campfires and in temples are not mere entertainment. They are the psychological scaffolding that transforms a distant, dreadful force into a nearby, revered guardian. The mind, seeking to manage its fear, discovers that the surest path to safety is not to slay the giant, but to earn its favor. The Jinn of pre-Islamic Arabia were the very definition of unseen terror. These spirits of the desert were believed to be the cause of sudden illness, desert mirages that led travelers to their deaths, and whispers of madness in the lonely night. They were chaotic, unpredictable forces of nature, and the only defense was a complex web of superstitious practices, from wearing specific amulets to whispering protective spells into the dark. They were the embodiment of everything humanity could not control. Then came a profound theological shift that would forever alter their story. With the revelation of Islam, the Jinn were not erased or demonized. Instead, they were given a new context, a place within a structured cosmos. The Quran explicitly describes the Jinn as a creation of God, beings made from a smokeless fire, possessed of free will just like humanity. This single doctrinal point was revolutionary. It meant that Jinn, like people, could be righteous or wicked, believers or unbelievers. They were no longer merely chaotic spirits, they were moral agents. This opened an entire emotional spectrum, transforming a monolithic fear into a nuanced possibility of respect. In the rich tapestry of Sufi mysticism, this possibility blossomed into beautiful stories. Certain jinn became wise spiritual guides, protectors of sacred places, or even devout worshippers in their own right. They were recast as potential allies in the spiritual quest, beings of knowledge and power who could, on occasion, offer their aid to the worthy. This was not a denial of their power, but a recalibration of its purpose. The cultural practices surrounding jinn evolved in turn. While the fear of malevolent spirits never fully vanished, communities began to speak of friendly jinn, those who could be approached for healing hidden ailments or for uncovering esoteric knowledge. Yet this was always done with immense caution, a delicate dance of respect. You did not command a jinn, you sought its assistance, acknowledging its autonomy and power. This careful relationship illustrates a profound psychological pivot. Religious doctrine provided the framework that allowed a culture to look its deepest fear in the eye and see, for the first time, the potential for an ally. The terror was not erased, but it was now balanced by the possibility of reverence, a respect earned not by diminishing the jinn's power, but by understanding its place within a larger, divine order. Ritual is the engine that drives this profound emotional transformation, the steady, repeated practice that rewires a community's deepest feelings. It provides a structured, safe way to interact with a once terrifying power, gradually stripping away the raw terror and replacing it with a sense of familiarity and even partnership. Look at the vibrant celebration of the Mexican Day of the Dead. Here, skeletal figures like the elegant La Catrina are not hidden away as grim reminders of mortality. They are embraced, adorned with flowers, and invited into homes with offerings of food and drink. What was once a universal symbol of fear, the grinning skull, is now a cheerful companion in a festival that honors ancestors. This is not a denial of death, but a radical reinterpretation of its role. Through the ritual of the festival, the community actively reframes the relationship, turning an abstract terror into a familiar, almost friendly part of the cycle of life. This process of emotional alchemy was observed by the sociologist Emil Durkheim, who saw that collective rituals do more than just honor a deity or spirit. They fundamentally reinforce the social bonds of the community itself. When people come together to perform the same actions, sing the same songs, and share the same beliefs, they create a powerful, shared experience. The terrifying entity, once a source of isolated dread, becomes a focal point for collective identity and strength. It becomes familiar, and in that familiarity, it becomes manageable. The fear does not simply vanish, it is diluted and transformed within the safety of the group. Over generations, these ritualized interactions embed new emotional associations deep into the cultural psyche. A child who grows up seeing their family leave offerings for a stern-looking guardian spirit does not learn to feel the same primal fear their ancestors might have felt centuries before. They learn a story of protection and watchfulness. They learn respect and awe that is inspired by power, not paralyzed by it. The ritual serves as a living bridge, carrying the emotional meaning of a symbol from one generation to the next, ensuring that the guardian story is not forgotten but is continually reaffirmed and refined. This is how ritual accomplishes its quiet magic, by providing the repeated, tangible actions that allow a culture to see a benevolent guardian in the face of an old monster. The battlefield was a place of pure chaos where death came without warning or reason. For a Norse warrior, the most terrifying presence was not the enemy across the field, but the spectral women he believed were watching from the shadows. These were the original Valkyries, whose very name meant selectors of the slain. They were not bringers of glory, but harvesters of souls, feared arbiters of a brutal and seemingly random fate. To see one was to know your life was forfeit, your body destined for the raven and the wolf. They personified the deepest terror of the warrior, the loss of control in the face of an indifferent and bloody destiny. How could such ominous figures become symbols of noble courage? The answer lies in a profound cultural shift that redefined the meaning of a warrior's death. As Norse society increasingly celebrated martial honor and the glory of battle, the narrative surrounding the Valkyries began to transform. Their role was no longer framed as a grim reaping, but as a divine selection process. They became the handmaidens of Odin, scouring the battlefield not for any corpse, but for the most courageous and worthy fighters. The fear of death was reframed as the hope for a glorious passage. Dying in battle was no longer a random, fearful end, but a purposeful conclusion that earned a warrior a seat in the great hall of Valhalla. This was a powerful psychological pivot, turning the agents of a warrior's greatest fear into the guarantors of his ultimate reward. Their evolution was cemented by later artistic interpretations, most famously in Richard Wagner's operas, where they were reimagined as majestic, romantic figures, soaring through the air with stirring music. This further softened their edges, transforming them from frightening phantoms into noble shield maidens, symbols of fate itself. The Valkyries now represented a blend of dread and admiration, a recognition that the power which decides our end can also be the source of our highest honor. Their story shows that even the most fearsome agent of destiny can be recast when a culture decides to find meaning in the very thing it once feared most. When cultures meet, their monsters meet too, and something remarkable happens in the collision. The Egyptian goddess Sekhmet began as a force of pure, unthinking devastation, a lioness sent by the sun god Ra to punish humanity. She was not merely a symbol of plague, she was the plague itself, a being so terrifying that her very breath was said to create the desert winds. Her name meant the powerful one, and her presence meant scorched earth and feverish death. To appease her, priests performed elaborate rituals, dyeing beer red to resemble blood and leaving it out for her, hoping she would drink it and fall into a stupor, her rage pacified. This was a being to be feared and, if possible, manipulated. Yet Sekhmet did not remain solely a goddess of wrath. Over centuries, through a process scholars call syncretism, her story intertwined with that of other deities, most notably Hathor, the goddess of love, music, and motherhood. This was not a replacement but a fusion. Sekhmet absorbed Hathor's benevolent aspects, transforming into a complex protector. Her fierce power, once only a weapon of destruction, was now also a shield. She became a guardian against the very diseases she once represented, a healer whose fury could be directed outward at the forces of evil. The same power that could kill could also cure, and in that duality, Reverence found its foothold. This blending of divine identities was a common strategy, especially for expansive empires. The Romans were masters of this theological diplomacy. As they absorbed new territories, they encountered a vast array of local gods and spirits, many of whom were feared for their volatile and demanding natures. Rather than eradicating these beliefs and risking rebellion, Roman authorities often sought parallels within their own pantheon. A local war god of a conquered tribe, known for bloody sacrifices, might be officially identified with Mars, but in the process, his more terrifying traits were often softened or rationalized within the broader context of Roman state religion. This integration served a profound psychological purpose. It was a form of emotional negotiation, a way to domesticate the terrifying other. By weaving a foreign, feared entity into the familiar tapestry of their own myths, a culture could reduce the anxiety of the unknown. The monster was given a new name, a new family, and a new role that served the community. Syncretism acts as a cultural crucible, where raw, frightening power is melted down and reforged into something that can be respected and even depended upon. It proves that the path from fear to reverence is not always a straight line, but sometimes a merging of paths where old fears and new hopes combine to create a guardian for a changing world. Deep in the mountain forests of ancient Japan, a rustle in the bamboo could signal the presence of a Tengu. these were not gentle spirits. With their crimson faces, long noses, and wings of a bird, they were feared as arrogant demons, masters of illusion who led travelers astray into treacherous ravines. They were blamed for mysterious fires, strange voices on the wind, and the sudden disappearance of anyone who dared to show too much pride. The Tengu was the embodiment of the wild, unpredictable dangers of the untamed mountains, a trickster whose lessons were cruel and often fatal. How could such a disruptive force become a revered teacher? The answer arrived with the spread of Buddhism, which provided a new lens through which to view the Tengu's formidable power. Buddhist monks seeking solitude in the very mountains the Tengu were said to rule began to encounter these beings in a different light. The Tengu's nature was not erased, but it was reinterpreted. Their legendary arrogance was seen as a perversion of spiritual ambition, a warning to practitioners on the path. Their talent for illusion and mischief was no longer mere malice, but a test of a monk's resolve. A Tengu's trick could reveal a hidden doubt or a moment of spiritual laziness, forcing the seeker to confront their own inner weaknesses. In this new narrative, the demon of the forest became a severe, unorthodox mentor. Their role expanded beyond the monastery walls. They became legendary masters of martial arts, their knowledge sought by legendary warriors like Minamoto no Yoshitsune. The stories told of how the young hero was taken under the wing, so to speak, of the Tengu king Sujobo, who taught him supernatural swordsmanship high in the sacred mountains. The Tengu's disruptive energy was channeled into a forge for discipline and skill. Their trickster nature was harnessed to create constructive challenges, breaking down the arrogance and vanity they were once said to represent. This transformation was so complete that today you can find Tengu enshrined as protective figures in many Shinto shrines. Their fierce visages, once a warning, now stand watch as guardians of the sacred grounds. They symbolize a hard-won wisdom, the idea that the most difficult trials can come from the most unexpected places, and that the force that once led you astray might, in the end, be the very one that guides you to mastery. The Tengu's journey from feared forest spirit to respected spiritual mentor shows that cultural evolution does not always destroy its old monsters. Sometimes it simply gives them a classroom. A story is the most potent tool for reshaping a collective heart. It does not command change but invites it, guiding listeners through an emotional landscape where a monster can slowly reveal its hidden nobility. Consider the Celtic banshee. For centuries, her piercing wail in the night was a sound of pure dread, a direct prophecy of an impending death in the family. That cry would send shivers of panic through a household, a moment of terror before grief. Yet listen to how modern storytellers have gently reframed her. She is no longer a random harbinger of doom, but is often portrayed as a mournful guardian, a spirit bound by loyalty to a specific ancient lineage. Her cry becomes a lament, a sad but honorable duty to forewarn her charges. This subtle shift in narrative, perhaps by giving her a tragic backstory of her own lost love or a sacred oath, evokes empathy where there was once only fear. We begin to see not a monster but a devoted servant, and the emotional response transforms from panic to a somber respect. This process is not accidental. It reflects a deep pattern in how we structure our understanding of the world, a pattern the mythologist Joseph Campbell called the monomyth, or the hero's journey. In this universal story template, the hero often must confront a terrifying, powerful figure, a guardian of some threshold. The initial impulse is to fight and destroy this obstacle. But the true victory, the moment of apotheosis, comes when the hero learns to understand this being, to see its perspective, and ultimately to reconcile with it. The feared figure is integrated rather than slain, becoming a part of a newly harmonious world. The audience, walking alongside the hero, undergoes this emotional catharsis with them. We learn through the safety of the tale that the menace at the gate might actually be the protector of the treasure. This is how stories function as tools of collective emotional education. They are rehearsals for the heart, allowing us to practice feeling empathy for the powerful and the frightening. With each retelling, the sharp edges of fear are worn smooth by the river of narrative, until what remains is not terror, but reverence for a power that has finally been understood. Inside the walls of a humble Slavic home, a different kind of protector emerged, one whose story is woven from the very fabric of daily life. The domovoi began not as a distant celestial force, but as a deeply personal and often feared presence residing behind the stove or in the dark space beneath the floorboards. This was no grand monster of myth, but a domestic spirit whose moods were as changeable as the weather. A misplaced word, a forgotten chore, or a messy kitchen could provoke its wrath. Families would wake to find milk curdled, tools broken, or hear the unsettling sound of footsteps in the night, all blamed on the capricious nature of their unseen housemate. This was a being of pure, intimate anxiety, a constant reminder that even within the sanctuary of home, one was not entirely safe from the unseen world. The initial strategy was not to conquer, but to appease. People learned the delicate art of coexistence, leaving out small offerings of bread, salt, or a bowl of porridge. They spoke to the domovoi with respect, addressing it as grandfather or master of the house. This was not worship in the traditional sense, but a pragmatic form of household diplomacy. With every offering left uneaten, with every night that passed without mischief, a fragile trust was built. The fearful spirit began to transform in the family's perception. Its presence, once a source of dread, became a sign of a well-ordered home. The same entity that would pinch a lazy servant was now believed to braid the manes of the well-cared-for horses. The spirit that caused noises in the night was now listened for, as its sounds could warn of an approaching fire or a potential thief. The emotional pivot was profound. Fear gave way to a sense of mutual dependency. The family provided a home and sustenance, and the domovoi provided its vigilant protection. It became the guardian of the hearth's warmth and the family's prosperity, a cherished part of the household whose well-being was directly tied to their own. This relationship was so deeply embedded that specific rituals grew around it, especially during major life events. When a family moved to a new house, they would perform a special ceremony to invite their domovoi to come with them, often symbolically carrying its spirit in a pot of embers from the old hearth. To leave it behind was unthinkable, a betrayal of a loyal protector. This evolution from a feared trickster to a beloved, if sometimes stern, grandfather figure reveals a powerful truth. The most enduring reverence is not always forged in epic battles or theological shifts, but in the quiet, daily interactions of shared space and mutual care. The domovoi story shows that a potential threat can become a cherished guardian not by a change in its nature, but by a change in our relationship to it, turning the very place we live into a partnership with the unseen. These archetypal protectors resonate so deeply because they are not inventions, but rediscoveries of something fundamental within us. Carl Jung proposed that beneath our personal minds lies a collective unconscious, a shared psychological soil from which universal patterns or archetypes spontaneously grow. Figures like the wise old man or the great mother are not copied from culture to culture. They emerge independently because they are innate parts of the human psyche. When a culture encounters a powerful, fearful figure, it is often confronting one of these raw archetypes in its most primal form. The Hindu god Shiva presents a perfect example of this profound duality. He is the destroyer, the lord of dissolution who dances the universe to ashes, a being whose raw power could inspire pure terror. Yet he is simultaneously the supreme benefactor, the master of yoga and meditation, the source from which new creation springs. He is not a god of random chaos, but of necessary cyclical change. the initial fear of his destructive capacity is not erased. It is transformed into reverence once it is understood as an essential part of a larger, regenerative process. This is the psychological journey of integration. A society, much like an individual, begins by fearing its own shadow, those aspects of existence that seem dark, destructive, or uncontrollable. Death, decay, and upheaval are terrifying when seen only as endings. But as a culture matures, it learns to see these forces not as enemies to be defeated, but as necessary partners in the cycle of growth. The destructive archetype is embraced, its power acknowledged as vital for clearing away the old to make space for the new. What was once projected outward as a monstrous force to be appeased is gradually drawn inward and recognized as a crucial component of wholeness. Our legendary protectors, in their many forms, are ultimately mirrors of this inner journey. They show us that the path from fear to reverence is not about conquering an external monster, but about learning to integrate the shadow within ourselves, transforming our deepest anxieties into the very foundations of our strength. Their fury was a primal force, an unstoppable consequence for the most sacred of crimes. In the shadows of the Greek world, the Erinnyes were the embodiment of a terrible, unswerving justice. Born from the blood of the primordial sky god Uranus, they were ancient, far older than the Olympian gods themselves. They had no interest in petty disputes or human excuses. Their sole purpose was to punish those who had spilled kindred blood, relentlessly pursuing murderers, particularly those who had killed their own parents, driving them into a shrieking, sleepless madness with the whips and torches they carried. They were the haunting conscience of a world before courts and laws, a living curse that gave form to the deepest social taboo. To be pursued by the Furies, as they were commonly known, was a fate considered worse than death itself, a perpetual torment from which there was no appeal. Yet this terrifying force would undergo one of mythology's most profound and public transformations. The playwright Aeschylus staged this very evolution in his epic trilogy, the Oresteia. The story follows Orsts, who is hounded by the Erinnyes after he kills his mother, Clytemnestra, to avenge her murder of his father, Agamemnon. It is a cycle of blood vengeance that seems to have no end, with the Furies demanding their ancient due. The brilliant resolution comes not on a battlefield but in a courtroom. The goddess Athena establishes the first murder trial in Athens, putting Orst's fate before a jury of citizens. When the vote is tied, Athena casts the deciding ballot, acquitting Orsts and acknowledging the new primacy of reasoned law over blind vengeance. The Erinnyes are enraged, their entire purpose and power threatened with obsolescence. But Athena does not banish or destroy them. Instead, she offers them a new home and a new purpose. She persuades them to become the Eumenides, a name that means the kindly ones. They are invited to take up a place of honor in a sacred cave beneath the Acropolis, where they will be revered by the citizens of Athens. Their role shifts dramatically. No longer are they the hunters of individual wrongdoers. They become the sacred protectors of the city's entire legal and moral order. Their fearsome power, once a source of random terror, is institutionalized. It becomes the foundational force that guarantees oaths, upholds justice, and deters crime within the newly formed polis. Their terrifying energy is not diminished but channeled. The fear they once inspired in every individual is now directed outward, becoming the awe that the entire community feels for the law itself. This was more than just a clever plot device. It was a powerful allegory for a massive social shift happening in ancient Greece. The move from tribal blood feuds to the civilized administration of justice through courts and civic institutions. The raw, chaotic emotion of vengeance was being ritualized and civilized into the structured process of lawful retribution. The Furies did not disappear from the cultural imagination. Instead, they were formally reconsecrated. By integrating these dread goddesses into the very heart of the city, Athenian society performed a brilliant act of psychological alchemy. It acknowledged the necessary power of retribution while placing it firmly within a framework that served the community's stability. The story of the Erinnyes becoming the Eumenides is a masterclass in how a culture can look its most terrifying forces in the eye and, through reason and ritual, convince them to stand guard at the gate. A society's survival can hang in the balance of a single legend. The harsh, frozen world of the Inuit people reveals this with stark clarity through the story of Sedna, the mistress of the sea. Her power was absolute and her mood was everything. When the seals and whales vanished from the hunting grounds, it was not seen as a simple shift in weather patterns. It was Sedna's wrath. She was feared as a terrifying, vengeful goddess who could withhold the marine animals, condemning entire communities to starvation with a turn of her head. Her legend was born from a profound economic dependency on the sea's bounty, a relationship so direct that the supernatural and the survival of the next meal were one and the same. Yet this fear was never the whole story. Sedna was also revered as the mother of all sea life, the ultimate source of the very bounty she could deny. This created a deeply complex emotional relationship. The same being who inspired terror during a lean season was the benefactor to be honored when the hunt was good. This required a remarkable emotional flexibility from the community. They could not afford to see Sedna as a simple monster to be conquered. Their survival depended on a more nuanced approach, one of careful negotiation. Inuit shamans played a crucial role in this delicate dance. They were believed to undertake perilous spiritual journeys to the ocean's depths, where they would find Sedna and gently comb the tangles from her long, flowing hair. This was not a command or a confrontation. It was an act of soothing, a ritual of appeasement meant to calm her anger and persuade her to release the animals. The community's reverence was not born from a lack of fear, but from the pragmatic understanding that confrontation was futile. Their respect was a strategy for survival, an acknowledgement that they lived at the mercy of a power that was both life-giver and potential executioner. This same dynamic plays out in agricultural societies across the globe. A spirit or deity linked to the fields could be demonized as a crop-destroying pestilence during a devastating famine. The same entity, after a bountiful harvest, would be honored as a generous fertility spirit, their destructive potential forgotten in the gratitude for full storehouses. The emotional spectrum of a culture stretches and contracts with its economic reality. When survival is precarious, fear is the immediate, visceral response to any power that controls the food supply. But as communities learn the rhythms of their environment and develop rituals to influence those rhythms, a fragile trust is built. Reverence grows not when the threat disappears, but when people believe they have found a way to communicate with it, to gently sway its intentions in their favor. The legend becomes a story of relationship, a continuous conversation between human need and the immense, unpredictable forces upon which that need depends. The sky itself could crack open with its arrival. For the peoples of the Great Plains and the Pacific Northwest, the Thunderbird was not merely a creature of myth, but a fundamental force of nature given form. The beating of its immense wings was the rolling thunder that shook the very ground. The flash of its fierce eyes was the lightning that could split an ancient tree or set the dry grassland ablaze. It was a being of immense, untamed power that commanded a primal fear, a respectful terror of the raw elements that could both give and take life. This was not a monster to be slain, but a reality to be understood. The communities who lived in its shadow recognized a profound duality. The same storm that the Thunderbird brought could be destructive, yes, but it was also the source of the life-giving rain that nourished the crops and sustained the buffalo herds. The lightning that shattered a tree also purified the air and could start fires that renewed the prairie. There was no separating the benefactor from the potential destroyer. They were one and the same. This understanding forged a relationship built not on simple admiration, but on a deep ecological wisdom. Tribes like the Lakota did not seek to control the Thunderbird, but to communicate with it, to honor its role in the great balance. Through sacred ceremonies involving prayer, song, and the offering of sacred tobacco, they expressed their gratitude and sought its blessing. They asked for the courage that comes with facing a storm, and for protection from the malevolent spirits that were believed to dwell in the world. The fear of its power did not vanish, but it was woven together with a profound sense of gratitude. This emotional blend, this coexistence of awe and thankfulness, reflects a worldview where humanity is not separate from nature, but a participant within its cycles. The Thunderbird was seen as integral, a necessary part of the system of creation and destruction that allows life to continue. Reverence, in this context, is not the absence of fear, but the wisdom to respect the power that inspires it, to see the protector in the storm and to offer thanks for the rain, even as you take shelter from the lightning. A stone dragon glaring down from a cathedral roof was never meant to be a friendly neighbor. Its grotesque face and coiled body were designed to be a warning, a spiritual scarecrow projected in stone to frighten away malevolent forces. This was the original purpose of the medieval gargoyle, a functional and fearsome piece of architecture, but something remarkable happened over the centuries. The craftsmen who carved these figures began to infuse them with a subtle humanity. A gargoyle might be given a comically puzzled expression, or be depicted in a moment of repose, looking less like a demon and more like a weary old guardian. The sharp, terrifying features were softened by whimsy and character. What was once purely terrifying became, over generations, charming and even beloved. The community did not tear them down, they grew fond of them. The gargoyle's transformation from a functional fright to a cherished protector was engineered not through words but through visual storytelling. Art became the tool for emotional alchemy. This process is even more deliberate in religious contexts. Look at the depictions of Mahakala in Buddhist Thankas. Here is a deity whose origins are fiercely protective and undeniably terrifying, often shown standing on a corpse adorned with skulls and wielding a curved knife. Yet the artist does not only emphasize this fury, they paint his face with a subtle, underlying serenity, or surround him with halos of golden light that speak of divine compassion. The message is not one of random destruction, but of focused power wielded for the protection of the Dharma and its followers. The devotee is guided by the art itself to look past the initial shock and see the benevolent intention. This visual reframing is a gentle but powerful form of emotional guidance. It teaches the observer how to feel. By repeatedly presenting a fearsome figure in a context of sanctity and purpose, the art trains the eye to associate that figure with safety rather than danger. The terrifying becomes approachable, and the approachable, over time, becomes adored. The legend is not just told, it is shown, and in the showing, the collective heart is slowly, surely, persuaded to change its mind. Its monstrous form was once the very definition of a sleepless night in the Philippine provinces. The aswang could be the beautiful woman by day, the creature of the night, a shapeshifter who preyed upon the vulnerable, stealing unborn children from their mothers' wombs or drinking the blood of the sick and dying. For generations, its name was a whisper that explained the unexplainable, a folkloric answer to the sudden, tragic deaths that medicine could not yet account for. It was a story born from primal fears of loss and the violation of the most sacred spaces, the home and the family. Yet this feared predator is undergoing a remarkable transformation in the modern imagination, finding new life not as a simple monster, but as a complex, even sympathetic figure. In recent films, television series, and graphic novels, the aswang is no longer just a villain. It is often portrayed as a tragic hero, cursed with its nature but struggling to retain its humanity. It becomes a protector of its own village, using its terrifying powers to defend against greater threats, whether they be foreign invaders, corrupt officials, or even more monstrous supernatural forces. This narrative shift is profound. The creature that once symbolized internal, familial terror is now recast as a bulwark against external, societal dangers. The fear of the Aswang does not vanish, but it is reframed. Its predatory nature becomes a necessary defense mechanism, its familiarity with the dark a tool for community survival. This evolution acts as a controlled experiment in managing cultural anxiety. By engaging with the Aswang through the safe medium of popular entertainment, modern audiences can confront traditional fears without the weight of literal superstition. The story becomes a playground for exploring complex themes of otherness, identity, and the moral gray areas between good and evil. The Aswang's journey from a folkloric terror to a potential guardian reveals how contemporary storytellers use old monsters to process new fears. The line between monster and protector blurs not because the creature has changed, but because the society telling the story has new enemies to face and new moral complexities to navigate. A ruler's most powerful tool is often the story they choose to tell. The transformation of a feared entity into a revered protector is not always a grassroots movement of the heart. Sometimes it is a deliberate act of political strategy, a calculated move to harness the raw power of a symbol for the state's own ends. Consider the complex case of the Egyptian god Set. For much of ancient Egypt's history, Set was the embodiment of chaos, the god of violent storms, the desert's harshness, and foreign lands. He was the murderer of his brother Osiris, a force of disruption set against the divine order of Mot. He was, in essence, the ultimate internal enemy. Yet during the 19th dynasty, something remarkable happened. The pharaohs, bearing names like Seti, meaning man of Set, elevated this chaotic god to a position of immense national honor. Set became the patron and protector of the monarchy, the divine champion who stood with the pharaoh in his chariot, smiting the external enemies of Egypt. This was a profound recalibration. The very force of chaos was now channeled outward, directed against the foreign threats that menaced the kingdom's borders. The fear of Set did not disappear, but it was reframed. His unpredictable power was no longer a random danger to the cosmic order. It was a weapon wielded by the state. This symbolic co-opting served a clear political purpose. By aligning the monarchy with such a potent and feared deity, the pharaohs legitimized their own absolute power. They positioned themselves as the only ones capable of harnessing chaos itself, uniting the people under a common, formidable defender. The emotional shift from fear to reverence was, in this context, also an act of ideological persuasion. This pattern repeats itself throughout history, right up to the modern day. Nations often reshape their pasts, recasting once demonized historical figures as heroic founding fathers or patriotic protectors. A revolutionary once branded a dangerous radical by the old regime becomes a national icon under the new one. Their rebellious energy is no longer framed as a threat to order, but as the very force that forged the nation itself. This reframing fosters a shared identity, a collective memory that glosses over complexity in favor of a unifying narrative. These calculated transformations reveal a crucial layer to our spectrum. Reverence is not purely an organic emotion. It can be engineered from the top down, a tool to consolidate social cohesion and control. When a ruler successfully rebrands a figure of fear as a symbol of protection, they do more than just change a story. They redirect the deep, primal anxieties of a people, offering a sanctioned target for their fears and a powerful symbol for their loyalty. The journey from monster to guardian, it turns out, can sometimes begin in the halls of power, not in the whispers of the village. A haunting bark would echo across the moors, a sound that could freeze the blood of any Scottish villager who heard it. This was the call of the Cú Sith, a creature of immense size with shaggy, dark fur and eyes that glowed with an emerald fire. It was not merely a wild animal but a fairy hound, and its bark was counted. Tradition said that if it bayed 3 times, a soul was destined for the grave. This was not a vague superstition, but a direct omen, turning the creature's very presence into a herald of imminent personal loss. The fear it inspired was immediate and practical, sending people rushing to the safety of their homes before that third, fatal cry could ring out. The Cú Sith was death's messenger, and to see it was to know your name was on its list. How could such a grim reaper ever be seen as a protector? The transformation began as communities started to weave more complex stories around this spectral dog. Instead of being a random agent of fate, the Cú Sith was given a specific employer. It became a guardian of the Scythian, the fairy mounds, a loyal hound serving the powerful and capricious fair folk. Its role was not to seek out death arbitrarily, but to patrol the borders between the human world and the other world. Its bark was no longer just a countdown to mortality, but a warning that one was straying too close to a sacred and dangerous threshold. This narrative shift was crucial. It gave the creature a purpose within a larger cosmic order, a job that made sense of its terrifying function. The emotional response to the Cú Sith began to change from pure, panicked dread to a more measured, respectful caution. In some family legends, the hound's connection became even more intimate. It was said to be attached to specific ancient lineages, appearing not to foretell any death, but to warn its chosen family of impending danger or spiritual trials. Its arrival was no longer a sentence but a solemn alert, a chance to prepare one's soul, set affairs in order, and face the inevitable with dignity. This evolution mirrors the journey of the Banshee, another Celtic figure whose wail transformed from a sound of terror into a somber service for a noble family. The fear of death did not vanish, but it was ritualized. The Cú Sith became part of the spiritual preparation for life's final passage, its appearance a call to reflection rather than a reason for flight. This shift from a mindless omen to a purposeful guardian illustrates a profound psychological step. When a culture can place a terrifying figure into a story that explains its role, the raw terror is diluted. The emotion becomes a blend of fear and respect, a sacred caution that acknowledges power without being paralyzed by it. The Cú Sith teaches that sometimes the most frightening protectors are not those who prevent the storm, but those who teach us how to sail through it. Deep within the human brain, the same neural pathways can carry 2 very different emotional journeys. The amygdala, that ancient alarm bell, flares to life in the face of a perceived threat, priming the body for fight or flight with a surge of cortisol. This is the raw biology of fear, a physiological state that narrows our focus to survival and pushes us apart. Yet this very same region, along with the prefrontal cortex responsible for higher reasoning, also lights up when we experience profound reverence and awe. The key difference lies not in the location, but in the chemical messenger and the resulting feeling. Awe, that potent blend of wonder and humility we feel before something vast, can trigger the release of oxytocin, the neurochemical of trust and social bonding. This is the biological fulcrum upon which our legendary protectors pivot. When a culture's stories successfully reframe a terrifying figure into a revered guardian, they are performing a kind of neural alchemy. They are guiding the brain to interpret a once fearful stimulus through a lens of safety and connection, effectively switching the dominant chemical response from cortisol to oxytocin. The monstrous form that once triggered a panic response now elicits a sense of protected belonging. This explains why the collective rituals surrounding these figures are so powerful. When a community gathers to honor a protective deity, the shared experience of awe synchronizes their emotional states, reinforcing social cohesion and a shared identity. The story itself becomes a tool for emotional regulation, transforming the ancestral fear of a chaotic spirit into a modern source of collective strength. Our brains are not passive receivers of these tales, they are active participants, being gently rewired by each retelling to find safety in the face of what was once only terror. Her form is a breathtaking paradox, a fusion of serene maternal love and terrifying martial fury. The Hindu goddess Durga rides into battle on a magnificent lion, her 10 arms wielding an arsenal of divine weapons, a beautiful yet fearsome vision that could easily inspire pure dread. She was created for a single, devastating purpose: to confront and annihilate the buffalo demon Mahishasura, a shape-shifting being whose tyranny threatened to overthrow the cosmos itself. The power required for such a task was immense and terrifying, a force of pure destruction that initially evoked awe and terror in equal measure. Yet this warrior is not feared as a monster. She is revered across the world as the Divine Mother, the protective force of the universe, whose violence is never random or cruel. Every swing of her sword, every strike of her trident, is precisely aimed at the forces of chaos and evil to restore and preserve cosmic balance, known as Dharma. Her ferocity exists solely to protect creation, making her the ultimate guardian. This is the heart of her emotional transformation. The initial fear of her power does not vanish, it is reinterpreted. It becomes the healthy respect one has for a righteous power that is vast enough to defend you from any threat. Her destructive capacity, when understood as being aligned perfectly with justice, becomes sacred rather than frightening. This is celebrated vibrantly during festivals like Durga Puja, where for days her compassionate aspect is emphasized. Elaborate clay idols depict her not in the heat of battle, but in a moment of tranquil victory, having just slain the demon, often shown with a gentle, maternal expression. She is adorned with beautiful silks and flowers, treated as a beloved guest visiting her family. Devotees sing to her as a refuge, a source of strength and comfort. The same goddess who can shatter armies is also the one who offers solace to the weary heart. This duality shows that reverence is not the absence of fear, but often requires a full embrace of the formidable. The community does not ask Durga to be less powerful or less fierce. They celebrate that exact ferocity because it is the very guarantee of their safety. The fear of her destructive potential is transformed into devotion through the absolute assurance of her protection. In worshipping Durga, a culture learns to see the terrifying face of necessary power and call it mother. A literary monster can shed his old skin within the pages of a new book. Bram Stoker's Dracula was the very archetype of terror, an ancient predator from the Carpathians who threatened the very soul of England with his unholy thirst. He was a thing to be feared, a symbol of foreign invasion and repressed desire. Yet, look at how modern storytellers have recast him. In many recent films and novels, this same vampire is no longer a simple monster. He is a tragic figure, a centuries-old nobleman cursed by the loss of his one true love, often driven by a desperate, protective love for a modern woman he believes is her reincarnation. His predatory nature is not erased, but it is framed within a narrative of profound loss and unwavering devotion. The fear he once inspired is now mixed with a powerful current of sympathy. We are invited to see the world through his ancient eyes, to understand the weight of his loneliness, and to respect the fierce, if monstrous, code of honor he upholds to protect his own. This humanization is the engine of his modern transformation, bridging the vast emotional gap between terror and a strange, complicated reverence. This trend is not limited to Gothic castles. Our screens are filled with these reinterpreted protectors. The werewolf, once a cursed beast representing the savage, untamed side of humanity, is now frequently the loyal guardian of a pack or a small town, his ferocity channeled against greater supernatural threats. His uncontrollable transformation is no longer just a curse, but a reluctant sacrifice he makes for the safety of others. These narrative shifts are far more than simple entertainment. They are a form of cultural conversation, a way for us to explore our own complex, modern anxieties about power, identity, and morality. In an era where power is often seen as corrupt and institutions are viewed with suspicion, we gravitate towards stories of powerful beings who are also tragic, who struggle with their own nature, and who ultimately use their immense strength for a protective, personal cause. By giving these old monsters relatable motivations, storytellers make the legendary more accessible. We are no longer asked to fear a mindless beast, but to empathize with a conflicted person who happens to possess terrifying abilities. This process keeps the ancient legends vitally alive, updating their emotional spectrum to reflect our current values. The fear does not disappear entirely, but it is woven into a richer tapestry of feeling, one that allows for admiration, pity, and a newfound respect for the guardian who walks a darker path. A creature so vast its wings could darken the sky, the Simurgh of Persian myth nested in the peaks of a remote mountain range, a place of clouds and mystery far beyond human reach. Its immense power and separation from the world of men made it an object of primal fear, a force of nature as untouchable and potentially dangerous as a thunderstorm. Yet in the great epic the Shahnameh, this fearsome being undergoes a profound transformation, becoming the protector and mentor to the legendary hero Zal. When Zal is abandoned as an infant due to his shockingly white hair, it is the Simurgh who finds him, carries him to her mountainous eyrie, and raises him as her own, sheltering him from the prejudices of the world below. She does not merely keep him alive, she imparts to him ancient wisdom, knowledge of healing, and the secrets of the world, forging him into a wise and capable leader. The fear of the unknown bird is utterly reframed, its remote home no longer a place of danger but a sanctuary for learning, its overwhelming power redirected into nurturing guidance. This shift mirrors a broader cultural movement, one that began to value enlightenment and mentorship over brute force. The unknown was no longer something just to be feared, but something to be sought out for the profound wisdom it could offer. The Simurgh's role teaches that awe can be channeled into pure reverence when an entity is seen not as a source of random power, but as a wellspring of knowledge. Intimidation melts away, replaced by the deep inspiration that comes from a being who uses its vast understanding to lift others up, completing the journey from a distant terror to a divine teacher. The line between a chaotic trickster and a revered guardian is often surprisingly thin. Across the globe, cultures have created figures who embody this very ambiguity, beings whose unpredictable nature makes them both feared and essential. The Norse god Loki is a masterclass in this duality. He is the ultimate agent of chaos, a shapeshifter whose schemes often lead to immense trouble for the gods, from the cutting of Sif's golden hair to the orchestration of Baldur's death. He was deeply feared for his capacity to unravel order itself, yet in countless stories that same chaotic cunning is precisely what saves the day. When Thor's mighty hammer is stolen, it is Loki's silver tongue and clever disguises that retrieve it. When the gods need a fortress built, it is Loki's tricky negotiations that prevent a disastrous payment. His mind, a source of fear, becomes a tool for overcoming impossible obstacles, earning him a complex, grudging reverence. A similar dance plays out across the ocean with the coyote of many Native American traditions. Coyote is a creator and a fool, a benefactor and a glutton. In one tale, he might steal fire to give to humanity, an act of profound generosity. In the next, his selfishness and appetite might unleash a flood or create a monstrous new danger. Communities learn to view him with a wary respect, understanding that his actions, whether helpful or harmful, were part of the world's intricate balance. You never knew what Coyote would do, but you understood that his chaotic energy was a fundamental force in the universe. This recurring theme of the Trickster Guardian reveals a profound universal truth. Human societies do not simply crave order, they recognize that a certain amount of creative chaos is necessary for survival and growth. We fear the unpredictable, yet we also depend on it to break us out of rigid patterns, to solve problems that pure strength cannot overcome. These figures teach us to respect the ambiguous, to acknowledge that the same force that can create a mess might also be the only one clever enough to clean it up. Looking at Loki and Coyote side by side, we see that the emotional transformation from fear to reverence is not about eliminating unpredictability, but about learning to value its role in a larger, more resilient system. This global perspective suggests that our need to find protectors in unlikely places, even in the hearts of tricksters, is a fundamental strand in the tapestry of human storytelling, a psychological tool for navigating a world that is never entirely safe or simple. Its stone gaze has watched empires rise and fall from the sands of Giza. The great Sphinx, with the powerful body of a lion and the knowing face of a human, was not always the beloved monument we see today. In its ancient origins, this colossal hybrid being likely inspired a deep, primal fear. It was an enigmatic guardian, a riddle carved in limestone, and failure to solve its challenge was said to mean a swift and certain death. This was not a passive statue, but an active sentinel whose very presence created a threshold between the sacred space of the pharaohs and the world of the living. To approach without the proper knowledge or reverence was to risk everything, making the Sphinx a figure of profound peril as much as it was a symbol of royal power. The fear it commanded was the healthy respect one must show a sleeping giant, a force of such immense and mysterious power that misunderstanding it could be fatal. Over the slow march of millennia, that sharp edge of terror has been worn smooth by the winds of time and familiarity. The riddles it once posed became metaphors, its fearsome guardianship transformed into a more general, protective symbolism. It began to embody the accumulated wisdom of the ages, a silent keeper of secrets rather than a direct threat to the unwary. This emotional shift reflects a broader change in the human relationship with the unknown. As our understanding of the world grew, we became more comfortable with ambiguity, learning to find wonder in mystery rather than only danger. The Sphinx did not change its form, but we changed how we saw it. Its enduring, weathered presence no longer whispers of immediate death, but of eternal patience. It has become a cultural icon, a beloved monument to human achievement, and a guardian of heritage for all of humanity. We now look upon its damaged face not with dread, but with a collective awe, seeing in its stoic silence a protector of history itself. The journey of the Sphinx from a figure of potential peril to a revered symbol shows that sometimes the most powerful alchemy is simply the passage of time, which can soften the hardest fears into the deepest respect. A Chinese dragon now dances in a New Year's parade in a city far from its ancestral rivers, its serpentine form a spectacle of joy, not a prayer for rain. This is the new reality of our legendary protectors, caught in the currents of a globalized world. Ancient symbols are being untethered from the specific soils and fears that once defined them, gaining a universal reverence that can sometimes wash away their original, more complex meanings. The very specific terror a medieval European farmer felt for a fire-breathing beast is a world away from the cheerful excitement a child feels for a dragon in an animated film. This process of globalization inevitably flattens some of the deeper cultural nuances, simplifying a rich history into a more digestible, marketable icon. Yet this same process also builds remarkable bridges of cross-cultural appreciation. A person in Brazil can feel a connection to the protective power of the Japanese Tengu, and a student in Egypt might find inspiration in the Norse Valkyries, all without sharing the original, localized dread that first shaped those beings. We are witnessing the birth of entirely new mythologies, where these figures are remixed and recombined into fresh narratives for a global audience, creating a shared library of symbolic guardians. And as our world faces new, borderless fears, this evolutionary process is accelerating. The abstract, overwhelming threat of climate change or a global pandemic lacks a simple face, a tangible form we can comprehend. Just as ancient societies personified famine and plague, we may be on the verge of birthing a new generation of protectors. These emerging symbols will likely be hybrids, blending traditions to address our shared anxieties. Imagine a future guardian born from the resilience of the domovoi, the ecological wisdom of the Thunderbird, and the healing knowledge of the Simurgh, a being that represents our collective hope for a restored planetary balance. Our ancient fears of starvation and wild animals have been replaced by anxieties about data security and environmental collapse, and our protectors will inevitably transform to meet them. The emotional journey from fear to reverence is a constant in the human story, a testament to our enduring need to look upon the face of our deepest anxieties and somehow find a way to call it guardian. That profound dance between fear and reverence is far more than a historical curiosity. It is a living, breathing part of our own psychology, a testament to our species' incredible ability to find meaning and protection in the very things that once terrified us. From the dragon whose fire could destroy a village to the spirit whose mischief could disrupt a home, we have seen a universal pattern emerge. Cultures across time have not run from their shadows, but have learned to invite them inside, offering them a place by the hearth and a new name, transforming agents of chaos into guardians of order. This emotional alchemy is driven by our deepest needs to survive, to find meaning in suffering, and to build a world that feels just a little less frightening. These legendary protectors are not just characters in old books, they are mirrors reflecting our own capacity for emotional transformation. They show us that our relationship with the unknown is never fixed, but is constantly being rewritten by the stories we choose to tell. The anxieties of our own age, whether they are about technology, the environment, or our place in a vast cosmos, are the raw material for the next generation of guardians. The hope embedded in every one of these tales is that today's overwhelming fear could, with understanding and a shift in perspective, become tomorrow's source of profound reverence and strength. Think about the figures in your own life or culture, perhaps a strict teacher you later admired, or a local legend that has softened over the years. We would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey through the emotional spectrum of myth has resonated with you, subscribe for more explorations into the mysteries that shape our world. In the end, the journey from fear to reverence is not just about the monsters we create, but about the humanity we discover along the way.